Canon image stabilized binoculars, and a Comet Nishimura observation on episode 356 of the Actual Astronomy podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We're amateur astronomers who love looking at the night sky, and this podcast is for everybody who likes going out under the stars. So we have a few Patreon supporters to thank before we get going here, Shane.
We do. Thank you to Mark, Sean, and Joe, our newest Patreon supporters. And as always, thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. We appreciate your support. It helps us keep the show going.
Yeah, and that Mark is Mark Radici over at Refreshing Views. I just point that out because Mark has a great YouTube channel with sort of a YouTube take on similar content. If people are interested, they should go check out the Refreshing Views YouTube channel. And I talk to Mark quite frequently offline, so it was not, I don't want to say it was funny, but I was like, I didn't know he was sending in a small donation. I was like, oh, that's great, and I'll just give his YouTube channel a big plug just for that. So
yeah, no, that's great. And also, Chris, I want to just shout out to two of our probably newer listeners that we have.
All right,
it's my niece and her partner. They listen to us during tea time in the afternoon, apparently. So,
oh dear,
and they love the music, Chris.
They love it. I know people do like the music from my cousin Will. So I gotta have Will on. And Will and I did a recording at Christmas together in person, but his microphone didn't have batteries. So it just wasn't there. It wasn't there. We have to do a draw at some point. Alistair, our friend Alistair Ling, has given us, or he has it, we don't have it in hand here, like a mini monocular wide field instrument. I really don't want to say it's a telescope. I think that's a misnomer.
Yeah, like it's was it camera optics?
Yes.
So it's camera optics with some 3D printed, I don't know, parts. I guess adapters, parts that allow you to change eyepieces and kind of handhold this thing. I'm not sure. I'm guessing you could probably figure out a way to put it on a tripod.
We haven't seen it, so caveat emptor.
Yeah, but he had, I think, photos of it on that episode. It looks very cool. Interesting, and it looks very capable. So certainly, we need to figure out a way to do that. So.
Yes. So September 17th, I was thinking maybe we'll do the draw around then. My observer's calendar is due to be done and going to press on the 15th. So then after that, should have some more time to play around with our podcast.
Yeah, and did we say that it was for Patreon supporters?
That's not what we said. That's what Alistair mentioned.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, that was his request for whatever reason. I think the main reason for that is, and for us, it actually makes it easier for us to do the draw because then, Shane, because he's the one that has access, goes in and just does like a random draw from the names that are in the Patreon, and then we already have the contact details for those individuals. Otherwise, we really have to spend a lot of time and effort trying to figure out how we're going to do the draw, which is what we ran into in earlier years of the podcast before we had any Patreon supporters. All right, let's get on to some binocular stuff. But maybe first, I'll just ask, have you been able to get out? Our conditions here, by the way, folks, are absolutely abysmal. These are the worst conditions for astronomy last night and this morning that we have had since we started the podcast, I think probably is fair to say, Shane.
Yeah, we get these. So I think a lot of people know, because this has been in news headlines around the world, is, there's a lot of forest fires happening in Canada. And depending on how the wind blows, they're far, far away from us. There's no real threat to where we live. But depending on how the wind blows, sometimes that smoke just envelops our province, essentially, or large areas of it, and makes observing next to impossible, and even going outside not much fun. But I did get a little bit of observing in during the daytime yesterday, actually. Earlier in the day, the smoke wasn't here, so I pulled out the H-alpha telescope and had a look at the sun. Super active still, and there is a prominence that, I guess from my point of view, when I do the left-right swap, It would have been at about 7 p.m., I would say, and probably about the size of like a Jupiter diameter. It was quite enormous, and it evolved throughout the day. I observed probably around 8 or 9 in the morning, and then had periodic looks until about 2 p.m. And it definitely changed during that time, as did some of the other features. There was a number of large filaments, some real bright areas too. What was kind of interesting is there was I don't know if it was a CME, a coronal mass ejection, but there was certainly some kind of matter, ejected from the sun that was a direct hit on Earth. And last night was supposed to be a very bright aurora show. So last night, for the listeners, would have been September 2nd. And I'm not sure if the aurora was out. I haven't checked, but certainly with the smoke we had last night, we weren't seeing it. But it was neat to look at the sun and just think, I'm kind of looking at the regions that would have sent that matter to us. So it was kind of fun. I enjoyed it.
Very
and
good.
Have you been out observing much?
I did see the aurora, not last night. It was the morning before. So I guess it was the morning of the 2nd. I was out just briefly, and I was trying to see if it was going to be smokeless enough to see the comet. It wasn't. The smoke at the time was rather thin and very little at ground level. And when I looked to the north, I was surprised to see what would have, if the moon wasn't in the sky and there wasn't any smoke, been probably a spectacular where I could see the curtains and maybe even detect a little color, because the moon was just less than a day past full or so, or whatever it was, maybe 2 days past full. And yeah, you could see a spectacular aurora in the northeastern sky where the comet was. So between the bright moon, the smoke, and the aurora, I was like, there's no way in heck I'm seeing this comet tonight. This is not happening.
No, and it sounds like you need decent or pretty good conditions, I should say, to observe this thing.
Yes, for sure. So the comet we're referring to is Comet Nishimura. Maybe I'll get to that in a second. Sure. Shane, we've done some past episodes on binocular astronomy. I sort of looked them up really quick. Could be wrong here, but most recently we did episode 322, A Beginner's Guide to Binocular Astronomy. 321 was the one that we did with Robert Azumendi about 3D printing binoculars and his analog sky project. Back on episode 249, we did constellation view binoculars. In episode 223, we did all about binoculars. And then in number 14, we did recent observing and a guide to astronomy binoculars way back when. But you know what? We do a lot of binocular astronomy. So I think we can fit, what this be, 2, 4, 5. We can do a 6th episode in 355 shows, I think, or 356 shows.
Yeah, well, I think we're okay. Yeah.
We're okay. In a recent episode, I can't remember when, one of the ones we recorded, I guess the week before last, I mentioned buying the 4th edition of the Backyard Astronomer's Guide. Not sure if you recall me chiming in with that.
Yes, I do.
So I don't know if it was buying that book or Alan Dyer's signature or what, but this is the 4th edition. It's my, I've had a couple of copies of them before, but when I received my first copy back in the early 90s, I also received a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars with the Backyard Astronomer's Guide 1st edition. And that's when I really get into sweeping the sky and observing. I'm not sure. Did you sort of start the same way with the Backyard Astronomer's Guide and a pair of binoculars?
No, I didn't actually. Well, sorry, I 50% of that. I started off with the book, but I did start with a 8-inch Daub, and then because of that book, I ended up getting a pair of, I think they were 10 by 50 Bosch and Lombs. At that point in time, that was Terence Dickinson's and Alan Dyer's recommendation for like sort of that best value astronomy binocular.
Yes, and in the recent edition, they go into a lot of detail, and then Ken Hewitt White does a binocular tour of the night sky. with 10 by 50s, and they still seem to side with 10 by 50s, although now they're sort of giving a little bit more recommendation to sort of like the 8 by 40-ish range as well. And they go through a lot of the more modern and recent instruments. What's neat though is the opening shot. So Alan Dyer arranged or did the photographs for the majority of the book, I believe. I haven't checked all the images, but for the buying binoculars for astronomy section, there's a shot of a yellow tent sort of lit from the inside, and then the Milky Way and a person looking through binoculars. Well, that person is Michael Painshot, who was one of the interpreters at Grasslands National Park, and somebody that we did events with for many years. And Alan had gone and grabbed him, or somehow set it up, and they went out and did these photographs the night before we were doing our event in the Grasslands National Park just a couple of years ago. So it's kind of cool to see that image, because I'd seen that image just after it was taken, because Michael had it on his phone. Alan had left, and then he was like, check this out. Alan took this photo of me. It's like this beautiful photo. And so it's really kind of amazing to see a photograph, which in a way, like, we had something to do with, whereas we do the outreach in the Grasslands National Park, and then Alan had gone down and done some photographs. And then so you have this photo from our favorite place to do astronomy in the binocular section for this book. And for me, it feels like this sort of strange full circle, where the book inspired me to go do astronomy. Eventually, I became really involved in the outreach at Grasslands National Park. And then we have a photo of somebody using binoculars in that place where we like to do astronomy. Anyway, it's sort of a roundabout thing, but I was like kind of surprised to see that photo in there and really impressed. Pretty cool.
Right on.
So I don't know if it was my nostalgia or recently being with Mike and his Canon 15 by 50 image stabilized binoculars at the star party we were at together. But recently I was out trying to hunt down Comet Nishimura. And and what happened was we had these fairly smoky conditions a week ago, and a couple of weeks back anyway, I'd seen a post where somebody had been able to view the comet through 12 by 60s. And I thought, if this person can see it in 12 by 60s down somewhere in the States, which might not be as good a spot as I have here, I should be able to see it in my 7 by 50s from my site, because it's in a pretty dark, the Comet Nishimura is in a pretty dark area of the sky for me. So I got up last Friday morning, because we recorded on Thursday evening. I got up at 3:00 on Friday morning. Then I get up and I scan the sky. I thought I found it, but I was like, this sky is not good enough to see a magnitude 7.8 or whatever it was comet. I went inside, updated my software, and the comet wasn't in that spot. I went back out and verified, it was just a double star that was masquerading as a comet. But the comet would come by. I don't know if it was a double star or not, but it was two stars relatively close together in my 7 by 50s. But I knew that comet would come by that spot a couple mornings later. Saturday morning, again, I got up at about 3 or 3:30. I went out. It was better, but like there was still a halo around Jupiter, no halo around Saturn this time. The moon had still set, so I knew I had probably a few more mornings to give it a shot. And I spent a long time scanning around for that comet. And I knew I had the right field, but I just couldn't quite see it. And at that point, I thought, I really need to get a pair of these image stabilized binoculars that have slightly higher power and a little bit better resolving capability, because Shane, you've got the set of the 12 by 36 version 2s. And maybe we should just stop here and say, like, how do image stabilized binoculars work? What's the main advantage of them?
Yeah, so there's electronics in them, and the Canon ones, I can't speak to the others, but I'm sure they're all pretty similar. The Canon ones use the same image stabilization in their binoculars that they use in their cameras and lenses. So it's just a gyro that you activate on the binoculars with the push of a button, and then it compensates for any sort of vibration or movement that you just have hand holding them. And it is one of the most profound experiences that I've had with binoculars, for sure. It's it's crazy because when you're looking through them without engaging the image stabilization, it's very shaky. It's what you'd expect from a 12 times magnification handheld binocular. Soon as you press that button, it's like you just put them on a tripod, except you're hand holding, and you have the luxury or the freedom to just pan around and look at whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
It is such an incredible use of technology. It really makes binocular observing much more doable for me, because one of the reasons why I never really did a lot of binocular observing before I got the Canons is they just drove me crazy. I just was not able to handhold binoculars very steady.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I'm going to bring out a tripod and all of the gear to stabilize binoculars, typically I'd just much rather bring out a telescope.
Telescope, why not?
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my story.
So on the third morning, now I didn't get the binoculars at this point yet, but on the third morning, I didn't set my alarm. I'd forgotten. In fact, it was looking like last Sunday morning was going to be very good conditions, but we were finishing up painting the observatory, which I'm now almost resigned to the fact that it's not going to be done this year. Just about, we're getting too close to winter, and there's three or four things that need to be done, and they're fairly major on it. And my builder, who's a really great builder, he simply just has some other larger projects that he's working on, and he just needs to drop down for a few hours here and there to do it. But those projects are just I think occupying him, and so I'm at his at his sort of free time availability, and I don't want to go bug him on the weekends. That he deserves to have a weekend too. So we'll just see. I hope he gets some time later in the fall to come and finish it up. But we did spend a long time working on it. Finished the paint job ish. Like, it's got a couple small things I have to do as he progresses along. But I was just bagged. The other thing I did is, as you know, Shane, I have some food challenges. I can't eat everything, and I decided to eat a bunch of different things that I can eat individually, but I shouldn't eat together. And when I do, I can get a migraine. And fortunately, I did get a migraine at 3:00 in the morning. That woke me up anyway. So I had a migraine headache, and I came out and I sat here for 10 minutes, took a couple Advil, and the migraine cleared up. And 10 minutes later, I was like, holy smokes, it's time to view the comet. It's 3:30 or 3:20 in the morning. This actually is the one time I was actually happy to get a migraine headache. And fortunately, it cleared up. Like I said, in about 15 or 20 minutes, I felt, like 90% better. And after drinking some water, and I was totally dark adapted because I didn't turn on any bright lights, of course, because when you wake up in the middle of the night with a migraine, you don't go around turning on bright white lights. So I was like, oh, I'm really dark adapted. I threw some heavier pants on and my coat and opened the door, and it was the clearest sky that I've seen this summer. I couldn't get over it. In fact, it must have just been a hole in the smoke that was moving through. And I thought, wow, if I'm going to see this binocular comet in my binoculars, this is the morning. If I don't see it this morning, it's just not visible to me, because it's that good a sky. So I went out, and it did take a little bit of effort. I like I said, I tracked the field down over the previous couple nights. I knew where it should be, and there's a bit of a path. If you, in these mornings right now, between about 3:30 our time and 4:30 or 4:45, you can see Castor and Pollux rising over in sort of the northeast-ish part of the sky. And if you follow this down a straight line, I don't know if you remember this or not. I was observing with you at somebody's acreage just outside of Regina. This might be 10 years ago now. And I had my 10 by 70s up on a parallelogram mount. I'm sure if there was a couple nights we were out there, and I found like a big stream of stars up on the Cancer Gemini board. I'm not sure if you remember looking at those or not.
I do. Yeah, I do remember that. I think I might have been imaging constellations that
You
night.
were. Yeah. You were like imaging, and I was doing visual, and you were kind of stealing views. And I think you even had something or other, or maybe your image stabilized binoculars out that night. We were having a pretty good night, and it was pretty cold. And I was looking at this stream of stars. Well, this comet was just sort of another few degrees below that stream of stars. So it's a nice binocular tour to come from Castor down to Pollux. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. There's a giant blue jay that's flying. Actually, there's two giant blue jays that are flying around, and there's one looking at me very inquisitively. It is a huge blue jay. Sorry about that. And so anyhow, you come down from Castor and Pollux, and then you'll see like a set of sort of far apart double stars. And then from one of those, there's this stream of stars that comes down. And then a little bit further along from there, you have this set of doubles that this comet was going to be passing by. So I kind of been familiar with this field for a long time. And then, over the past couple nights had become more familiar with it. And then I did that same process that I'd done on the previous nights, and I just could barely see it. I would say it was probably about as easy to see as M33 when it's about maybe 25 or 30 degrees high. So this was not an easy observation by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I guess probably keep an eye on this one to see if it does brighten more. There's some thought that it could, so I guess we'll see what happens.
I did a sketch. I put it in the notes. Not sure if that can be included or sent out somewhere, and you can see the Castor and Pollux. I didn't put too much of the star stream in there, and I just sort of put the fuzzy spot beside the two stars that you can see, and jotted in some of the other stars. This was sort of just a very rough sketch from memory that I did the following day, but I was able to see it through the 7 by 50s, but it was tough, and I really was resolved after doing that to get the Canon image stabilized binoculars, because over the years I enjoyed the views through Mike's 15 by 50 image stabilized binoculars, and I'm not sure, have you ever spent much time looking through those ones?
I wouldn't say a lot of time. Like when we've been out, Mike has handed them off to me, and I've used them to look at things, or he's had them on a tripod, and I've used them there as well. So, but not extensive.
Yeah. When he first bought those, we took reclining chairs up to that hilltop spot sometimes we used to go to outside of Moose Jaw, and we were up there, and we were just sort of trading the views back and forth. And I was so blown away by the 15 by 50s. I thought for sure that I would get them, but the thing with those that was a little bit of a stumbling block was, well, one, they are a little bit more expensive than the other models, I think, by about 90%.
Okay.
They're a little bit more expensive. And the other thing is, as you've seen with Mike's, he'll often mount them on on a little tripod, or if you don't mount them on a tripod, they do work perfectly if you're seated. And for seated in a reclining chair or zero gravity chair, I don't think there's much better than those 15 by 50s.
Yeah. I think those are ideal, actually. I've contemplated many times picking those up because they certainly go deeper.
And I did always like them so much, but when you bought your 12 by 36 version 2s, what really drew me to those was their lightweight capability. And thinking about how I use my binoculars, which are all between about 24 and 28 ounces, I like the fact that those 12 by 36s of yours were in that lower end weight category. So it's much easier to just grab them. And like I was the past week, kind of taking them and wandering around kind of almost in the bush here, trying to get a good spot where I might view the comet. And I do enjoy that aspect where you're just kind of standing, walking around, and then taking good views of the nighttime sky, which you might do if you're just at home, or if you're traveling. You're probably not going to have a reclining lawn chair, or there's all kinds of other instances. Like you said, I could for sure see getting a pair of the 15 by 50s at some point in time. But just for this purpose, which is just trying to find a good spot, which has a good horizon to get a good view of a comet at the horizon, I was like, I think this is what I want. Although I think the 15 by 50s could work well for that. The difference in price kind of put me over the top because my astronomy budget is a little bit strapped these days due to the observatory build. to say the least.
Yeah, it makes sense. You have to prioritize that stuff, and the observatory is the right priority probably for now.
So there's a couple oddities with these binoculars, these image stabilized binoculars from Canon. One is the power. They come in a few different powers. There's an 8-power one. There's a couple 10-power ones, 12 power, 15 and 18 power. And why is that important, Shane? Why is this higher power important when we're using them for astronomy?
Well, for me, it just you kind of go deeper in a way. Like it just the magnification is a nice thing to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're able to resolve more, but there is a cost. Like these end up getting into the price range of not quite what they call like alpha binoculars, like Swarovskis or items like that, but they're definitely getting up there in price. I think the least expensive one for astronomy would be the 10 by 30s, and I think they go for about between $500 and $600 these days. So that's sort of the entry binocular, and these 12 by 36s are the next ones up. They make an 8 by 20 or something like that as well, but I'm not sure what the advantage of having image stabilization at 8 power would be. I've never looked through those.
Yeah, I've read about those. I'm intrigued because they're somewhat smaller, and people that have used them, like on birding forums, they do say that you don't, like, usually with those smaller binoculars you can get away with hand holding quite well. But these birder reviews that I read, they said, that image stabilization, it's kind of like you think you're okay without it, and then you use it, and it just really, again, enhances that view because everything just is now steady, and you can take in more detail of whatever you're looking at, birds or whales or whatever is of your interest.
There are some oddities like the lens caps or lack thereof, like these 12 by 36s and I think some of the other ones don't come with lens caps. It's sort of a bit of a strange, because typically when you get binoculars, they come with caps or a large cap or something you can put over the objective lenses. But I think for many of these image stabilized binoculars, they don't come with lens caps, do they?
No, and that's been a complaint that people have had for years and years. Like I bought mine probably close to 10 years ago now. And even back then, that was a complaint. So it's surprising to me that Canon hasn't, figured out a way to include some caps, because I don't think that would eat into the margin very much. But who am I to say?
Yeah. The other thing is they don't come with really much of a protective case. They come with sort of an oddly I don't know how to describe it. It looks like you took half a parallelogram and cut it in two or something. It has like this strange, very thin fabric case with a somewhat slanted Canon silver anodized metal logo on it, but it doesn't really offer very much in the way of protection for basically what amounts to a piece of electronic binoculars that you're going to be taking outside with you. It's sort of an odd combination to put a fabric bag with this sort of binocular versus almost every other binocular I've ever purchased. They come with at least a semi-hard case, or like a case that's going to provide some sort of protection from being crushed inadvertently.
Yeah, the case certainly was lacking. I used it for a number of years. And then I upgraded to a Pelican 1200 case to protect it when I'm flying or driving. And, I really enjoy it. Although it looks like you found a really nice case.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to get yet, but I'm still kind of kicking around a few ideas. But it's sort of all worth it, even for the price and even for some of these shortcomings. Oh, and the eye cups are rather odd too. They have these very thick eye cups that you can roll down and use very effectively rolled down with glasses with these binoculars. However, the plastic is extremely thick and difficult to fold down. So it's not something I'm going to be wanting to do frequently, because of, pretty quickly, I would imagine I would stick a greasy finger on the eyepiece lens. So I'm going to just leave mine folded down. I don't know. Is that how you use yours?
Yeah. I leave mine folded down too.
So yeah, now I got to go through the problem of finding lens caps that can work with the folded down eye cups because with them folded down, the eyepiece caps that do come with it, strangely enough, do no longer fit once those are rolled down. But it's sort of all worth it because when you press that little button, like you said, it just takes the shake out. So we took them up on the hillside here beside the observatory. First night I had them, and did a tour around with my wife, and I handed those to her, and kind of said, okay, try to find the star. And she found the star, and I said, now press that little button. And then she was just complete, even though I had been talking about these for years, she was just shocked at at how good the image was. And for her, she said it made it a lot easier just to even look through the binocular, which I hadn't really thought of before, because I personally don't have as much trouble looking through binoculars. But she said for sure these were basically like the easiest binoculars she ever found to look through. And then I was surprised, Shane, because I went back to my Vixen Geomas, my 7x50s, which I bought because they are one of the easiest binoculars to look through. And after using these Canon 12x36s for a couple nights, and then going back to the 7x50s, I was actually pretty surprised that I sort of had to almost readjust and readapt to how these other binoculars worked, considering they were previously my favorites as far as ease of view goes. So I'm not sure if you had enough experience with other binoculars before getting yours, but the 12x36s are certainly a very easy binocular to look through.
Oh, they are. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about them. I've logged hours of usage, not just nighttime, but lots of daytime observing, nature and things like that. They're just wonderful binoculars.
So there's a few other sizes. So we talked about the 8x20s, talked about the 12x36s that we have now. My 12x36s are the version 3. Yours are the 12x36 version 2. I have to say, in the dark, I don't know that I would be able to tell you which was which. I think they're essentially the same.
I think yours, correct me if I'm wrong, when you press the stabilization button, you don't have to hold it. You just press it. Is that correct? And then it's engaged?
Nope.
You do have to hold it.
You do, although I'm going to say this, is that I think it clicks in a little bit sooner-ish. And the other thing is that when I first was using it, I was really pressing it, but you don't really need to press it. You only need to put your finger on it. It's almost just the weight of your finger will turn it on. I'm not sure. Is yours that sensitive, or do you really have to press the button?
You do have to press it. Like it's not that light.
Yeah. With these, like even just walking around, a lot of the time I find that the button just ends up being pressed. Now, I'm not really that worried about it because the batteries in these will last quite a long time. And I think that is one of the other differences, is they figured out a way to get the battery to last a little bit longer in these. And then it seems like the button is a little bit easier to depress. And somebody said, or just like in reading it online, they said that it does engage a little bit faster. Although again, I'm not sure if I would notice in practical use. I think it's somewhere in the realm of half a second or a quarter second faster engagement. But I mean, you can just press the button as you're taking them up to your eyes, and often that's what you end up doing anyway. So I don't know if that's a real measurable improvement there or not.
Yeah, hard to say.
Hard to say, but they are what they are, and they certainly are a pretty neat trick. So I've tried a few of the others. The others that I've tried are the 10x30s. Have you ever had a chance to look through those?
No. The only ones I've looked through are the 15x50s and the 12x36s.
Yeah, and I honestly think that the 12x36s and the 15x50s, I think these are the ones to pick between or to own both of. Just because the view is appreciably different. The other ones I've looked through, and the ones that I really hemmed and hawed over for the longest time, because the earlier versions were pretty inexpensive, were the initial 10x30s. Mm-hmm. And the thing that kept me from buying those, I looked through them so many times, but was there, I believe these are the very early ones, like maybe late 90s or early 2000s. But I believe they really had a lot of reports of a limited lifespan on those ones. And I just couldn't fathom spending. And at the time, they were pretty inexpensive, maybe like $299 or something like that, like compared to now. And I just still couldn't imagine spending like $300 or $350 or whatever they were on a pair of binoculars that might only last, 8 or 10 years or whatever people were saying. But at the time, there was some concern. They've reissued them a couple times since, and these ones are all much more robust than the original ones. But I've even read where a lot of the original ones are now still in action. So I think some of those initial concerns weren't founded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
I did find with the 10x30s, they have a 6-degree field of view versus the 5 degrees of the more recent editions of the 12x36s. It was nice to have the extra field, but I found that at 10 power, I'm very close to being able to hold a 10 power steady enough, especially in a lightweight binocular, that if I was to get a 10x30, I would almost try to find like a 10x32 or a 10x35 in a roof prism design and simply go with that. I just find that I didn't get that much benefit from the image stabilization versus just simply having a lighter weight binocular. For me, it's about having a binocular that's sort of in and around, like the ideal weight for me anyway, as an individual, is around 24, 25 ounces. And I just found that with the 10x30, it was close enough to that I just wasn't getting that much of a benefit over the non-stabilization. You can just try it. Like you put them up to your eyes and then you press the button and release it. And I was like, there was an improvement, but I don't know if it's an improvement that I'm willing to pay that much money for, unfortunately. So I eventually abandoned the idea of getting the sort of the least expensive binoculars for astronomy from Canon.
Yeah. All makes sense. There's a lot of factors there to consider, and some of these ones are fairly close in magnification and objective size. So what drew me to the 12x36s was it seemed like the biggest objectives and the most magnification that was still in a fairly small form factor and fairly light, that I could use them for extended periods and not really notice it. Any bigger than that, and it seemed like you're probably not wanting to hold them up to your eyes for hours at night. You need a little break probably at some point.
Yeah, and that brings me to the 10x42s, which are often commented on as being the best astronomy binoculars, sort of that money can buy. They're certainly, I think they are the most expensive one on the Canon line. I think they're well up into like sort of that $1,500 price point. And so for the longest time, I thought that I would get a pair of those, and I was saving up my money to get a pair. And I went to a star party, and there was a well-known amateur astronomer there, and they had a pair of them, and they said, go for it, Chris, here, spend an hour with them. And I spent an hour with them. They were excellent. They were probably among the best binoculars that I've ever looked through. However, I found that they did not fit my hands, and I found them awkward to hold. And they were 37 ounces, 36 or 37 ounces with the batteries. And I found that they were just heavy enough that, again, you want it to be seated. And in my mind, well, if I'm going to be seated and have to sort of sit with them, then I really want that extra 5 magnification. Again, I just didn't see as much improvement with the 10 by power as I did with like the 15 power. 15 power just, unusable, looking straight through them without the IS engage or image stabilization engaged. And then, without the with the image stabilization engaged, they were just fantastic. So all these binoculars, you have to put in a set of AA batteries, and when you press the button, the batteries engage this system that's in the binoculars that allow them to compensate for your movements by about between 3/4 and 1 degree. But again, I just didn't see the improvement in the 10x42s. I've certainly used a lot of 10x42s, and again, it just seemed like, if I'm going to get the best out of these, you're almost back to mounting them or having to be seated. And I really like the fact to put a pair of binoculars just sort of around my neck, or to hold them and then walk around at the star party and look through other people's telescopes and then sort of cruise the sky or do my binocular tour at a star party. I just found that the 10x42s surprisingly didn't do it for me. And that's when I actually ended up taking the money and buying my Takahashi FS60, which is actually much less expensive than a Canon 10x42 binoculars anyway.
Well, yeah, that's the thing with some of these image stabilized binoculars is you can get a pretty nice telescope for those binoculars. And certainly, they are very different tools for different purposes, but I don't know. I sometimes have a hard time parting with a lot of money for binoculars, but I'm not as much of a binocular guy, so that's probably why.
I do like using binoculars for astronomy, and it is a real cornerstone of my observing. However, I was just surprised. But I do know lots of people. I do know people that have simply, instead of buying that telescope, after having some discussions, like when I was teaching my astronomy class, that have gone and bought the 10x42s. They said, well, what is the best one for astronomy? So, well, it's supposed to be the 10x42 because they have ED glass. They're very wide field at over 6.5. I think they're 6.6 degree true field of view. It's slightly more than 10 power. So I think you do really get a real complete package in that 10x42 Canon. And I think that really is like an ultimate binocular. And because it is so flexible, you can use it for birding, you can use it for astronomy, you can use it for nature stuff, like whatever you want. You can take it on trips with you. It's a little bit heavy, but it's not as heavy as the 15x50s. So standing with it is a little bit more practical. It can be sort of the best all-round binocular for some people. But for me, I want to be able to kind of hunt and peck around a little bit more. And the idea of, every time I use it, wanting to sit down a lot of the time is going to chip away at me a little bit, I think. So the 12x36 is again, with that little bit more power, and really the resolving capability of a 12x36 versus a 10x42 is about the same. Plus, we have those constellation view binoculars. And I was chatting with Dave Chapman the other day about these.
Okay.
And Dave said what he does is he takes the constellation view binoculars, sticks them in his pocket, and takes his 12x36s and those out at the same time. So he has the wide field of the constellation views, and then the 5 degree field of the 12x36s. Because I suppose one of the downsides of the 12x36, it does have one of the smaller true and apparent field of view. So the 10x42s give you 6.6, the 10x30s give you 6, the 15x50s will only give you a 4.5 true field of view. 4.5 true field of view feels very wide when it's a 15 power binocular versus a 5 degree at 12x. So there is some compromise there for a binocular that costs about half the price of some of these other models.
Yeah, I like it.
Talked about the 15x50. The 15x50, again, if you are in a spot where you can sit much of the time, and I know lots of observers who use them, I could definitely see owning a pair of these one day, because sometimes you can find them at a very good discounted price. Like I think that's what Mike did with his. I think he paid about the same as the price of the 12x36s for his, and a number of years ago. And the thing I really like about the 15x50 is, for some reason, they almost act like they have nebula filters in them, even when they don't. Like I find like nebulae just jump out in those binoculars like no binocular I've ever used before.
Yeah.
And they're just like a magical binocular. But like I said, I have to be seated. Sorry, what's that, Shane?
I just said they are for sure. Yeah.
I just have to be seated to get that effect. Otherwise, I'm standing, and if I'm standing using them, I just can't stand and use them for that long. But I think for seated, like if I'm in a reclining lawn chair, that's the binocular I'd want. And I was chatting with Dave Chapman about it, and he said, yeah, he felt the same. He has the 12x36s as well, and his friend as well has the 15x50s. And then when they go camping or whatever, and she goes in, he's like, could you leave those binoculars? And certainly I think I've done that before with Mike, where, and I could see myself doing that still in the future. If we were out camping and it's a nice summer evening and we are seated, I would definitely want to have those 15x50s. But if I'm going to travel or not have a tripod available or not have a reclining seat available, then I think the 12 by 36s are something that I'm just going to want to have at that point a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The big boys are the 18 by 50s. And I'm not sure. Have you ever tried these ones?
No, I haven't. Somewhat intrigued because of the high magnification, but from what I've read online, they are quite heavy, and I don't know that I'd enjoy them. So I would like to look through them if I could.
So by heavy, these ones come in, I'm just sort of recalling off the top of my head, but the 10 by 30s are around 20 or 21 ounces. The 12 by 36s, I think they come in around 24 ounces or 25 ounces once you load the battery in. 10 by 42s come in at around 37 ounces. 15 by 50s come in at around 43 or 44 ounces. And I think the 18 by 50s are even a couple ounces heavier than that, maybe getting close to 50 ounces once you put the batteries in. I found with the 18 by 50s, I just almost absolutely couldn't stand, other than looking at the horizon, I just couldn't even raise them up hardly. Like, it just didn't seem practical. That's like holding a couple bricks in your hand almost. Like, it just seemed that heavy.
Yeah, that's too much.
Yeah. And as well, at 18 power standing, I found that the image stabilization wasn't quite enough. You absolutely had to be sitting versus the 15 by 50. Absolutely, image stabilization is enough hand holding the 15 by 50 while you're standing. And if you were like a young, really well-built individual who maybe did some pretty good weightlifting on the side, I think the 15 by 50 would be just like the ultimate binocular just to carry around standing even, because the image stabilization still, I feel, works nearly perfectly even standing. But 18 by 50, you need to be seated. And it's a 3.7 degree true field of view, which to me just starts to feel restrictive. Like, it really does start to feel like a pretty small field.
And to me, one of the advantages for binoculars typically is the wider field of view. So if you start to lose that, to me, you're taking away some of the big value points for using binoculars.
The place where I could see the 18 by 50 working quite well is if you were in a city and had very limited available spots that were dark and couldn't really get to spots, and you simply wanted to do some lunar observing with a binocular. That's the binocular. So if you can sit and or prop yourself up really good against something, which in the city there's lots of walls and things with railings and stuff, I think that would be a good use case for the 18 by 50. I could totally see somebody in that situation preferring the 18 by 50 over all these other ones.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a use case for everything, I guess.
Yeah, the 42s, 50s, they all have the ED glass. And I guess that's one of the other downsides of the 12 by 36s is, for me, I find that they do have quite a bit of secondary color. In the daytime in particular, I found like looking at buildings or other things, like you can see this chromatic aberration. And then at night, though, it's much more reduced. And I can see a little bit around Jupiter. I didn't really see much around the moon, I think just because it's so much brighter. I haven't looked at Saturn yet. A few of the bright stars, maybe I can just start to see it. So it's not really that impactful, because a 12 by 36 binocular, no matter how you cut it, isn't really like a planetary tool. But we were looking at the moon, and the moon does look absolutely spectacular through them. You can see a lot of craters in that. We didn't really notice the secondary color looking at the moon with them.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, not sure. Have you noticed the secondary color much with them?
No, especially even I've used mine extensively in the daytime, and I can't say that it's been noticeable to me. Now, I'll take another look through them to see if I can identify it, but maybe I'm just not as sensitive to it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe. And I am very sensitive to secondary color. So I've even gone to the eye doctor, get new prescription glasses. They didn't use high index glass, and I've had to go back and had them remake my glasses, say like these are just unusable for me, because I find like the secondary color often in just off the shelf prescription polycarb glasses. To me, it's I can't wear them. I just get like a headache. And everything either has a blue fringe or a red fringe to it, typically in the glass they use. So it's, in fact, I have to say this, it doesn't have as much secondary color as my glasses do. And it could even be my glasses. So keep in mind that I am wearing my glasses while I'm looking through these. So that could be playing a factor in your glasses. May not have as much secondary color, so you simply just may not be noticing that.
Yeah, it could be.
All right, so that's kind of it. I haven't never looked through any of the other image stabilized binoculars from any of the producers other than Canon. Zeiss has a 20x60, which I imagine are on your wish list at some point, Shane, but I don't know.
Maybe Dream List. I'm pretty sure that would be out of my price range. I think Nikon makes some too, don't they?
I think they do. I'm not familiar with the Nikons. Fuji has made some, which have gotten various reviews, some of them very positive, some of them neutral, and some people don't like them. And then there's another company that seems to make a lot for like Vixen and others. They come in, the popular model seems to be like a 16x42, but the eye relief seems to be small, and they again only have about a 3.7 or 3.8 true field of view. So that seems to be small as well. And they're not sort of optimized for astronomy, having only whatever it is, like a 2.5 millimeter exit pupil. So I was able to get reasonably clear enough skies to look at M31, M11, M22, M42, the Pleiades. Looking at the Pleiades compared to my 7x50s, there's a chain of stars. They're like, I think, 7th magnitude stars that meander up to Merope. I'm sure if you're familiar with that.
Yep. Yeah, I am.
And on this night with some smoke and the moon just past full, very close to the Pleiades in the sky, in 7x50s, I could just see it as a hazy line, maybe the odd specks sort of flashing in and out through the 12x36s. All those stars in that line are resolved. I can't remember how many there are. And that really gives you a good indication. It takes little streams of stars and other groupings of stars from being just a fuzzy spot to being resolved. So when you pointed at something like M11 through the 7x50s, that's just sort of a little fuzzball by that sort of golf putter asterism in scutum, versus with the 12x36s, it's a sort of a large ball. You can still frame that whole golf putter, and then what happens is you can start to see some individual stars there. And then as well, like the double cluster, like it really begins to be resolved, versus in the 7x50s, you can see some of the brighter stars, and then it's sort of a speckled, hazy background a bit, still very pretty and nice wide field. But in the 12x36s, you really start to get some pretty good resolution there.
Yeah, I really love those binoculars. And if I like it, because there's electronics, at some point I expect that the image stabilization will quit working. That would be an instant rebuy. They're just that good. I would not hesitate. I use them a ton, and I just love them.
Yeah, I think in what I've been able to research, the other thing, I suppose, like earlier on, when these were released in the 90s and then early 2000s, once they started coming out with these second and then eventually third versions, there was concerns about the longevity of them. Canon is a good and reputable brand name. And then, like you said, they are basing it on the technology in their camera lenses. And I think because of that, they've done a good job at creating a product that has a very good lifespan in the field. And you don't hear many stories of them failing. I think there was some very earlier models that had some sort of problem with the plastic coatings, but I can't help but think maybe people were putting bug repellent on their hands or other things and then handling the binoculars. And then perhaps that was causing some of the breakdown, or maybe there was a flaw in one of the production runs. And I haven't heard any of those comments about the coatings on the sort of the rubberized coating on the binocular, not the optical coatings on the binoculars. And then there's even people that did the extreme of they bought the binoculars and then just scraped off the plastic, like it's just like a rubberized coating. So it's nothing that interferes with the binocular use itself. It's just the external rubber sometimes had shown external wear in some of the earlier versions, I think.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly comment on their toughness because I've dropped mine.
Oh, wow.
In fact, like accidentally off of our kitchen island. So probably about a 3-foot fall onto ceramic tile. And this has happened twice in their lifetime. And they're still fine. They're still collimated. Yeah. There's no issues. Like, they are tough.
Yeah.
The only thing that does happen occasionally when I engage the image stabilization, it's like it's not collimated. Like, I can't merge the images. Mm-hmm. So I just release it, turn it back on, and it's fine. So sometimes I don't know, maybe that's a sign of, mine are failing, or after dropping them a few times, maybe that's the result. But I'm like I say, I'm going on about 10 years, lots and lots of use, and they just keep on going.
Yeah. And you can read many stories of that. I suppose that's the other thing that eventually kind of put me over the top is initially I did have some hesitation on the longevity, because it's just unknown. When a product is new, it has electronics and it's meant to be used in the field in a different way, maybe than what was the original intent of the design. Now it seems to be pretty, lock sure that you're going to get these. And unless you get into some sort of other weird or wacky problem, it's something that should last for at least a couple decades. So I know a few people that have had them for, like yourself, 10 years. I know some people have had them for 20 or 25 years now. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of hoping I last another 25 years, so, so I thought, well, it's time to get them. But speaking of time, Shane, I got your message here a couple of moments ago, and do you have anything else to add to this episode on some image stabilized binoculars that I finally bought after many years of thinking about it?
Nope, nothing else, Chris.
And you really put me over the top on getting these, because I had never looked through the call by 36s. They were the ones that interested me the most, simply because they have decent power and are sort of the lightest weight for having more magnification than typically you would handhold, because at 12x, when you're not hand holding, you can kind of sort of see those close-in fainter moons of Jupiter. But then when you just touch that button, you can see the moons right in tight on Jupiter. You can really begin to see craters on the moon, and you begin resolving star clusters. And like, even in moderate smoky skies, I was able to punch through and see M31, whereas my 7x50 just couldn't even see some of this stuff. And so that sort of is the proof in the pudding for me, anyway. Yeah.
They're winners, that's for sure.
Yeah. Look for some of my other non-image stabilized binoculars on a used astronomy forum soon to help pay for these. All right, Shane, anything further that we missed or need to add?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And dear listeners, please subscribe and do us a favor and share the show with other stargazers you know. You can always send us your ideas, observations, and questions to actualastronomy@gmail.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.